All right, the rattly sound is coming, and we're going to be broadcasting shortly. This is now Bridge to a Better World. Uh-oh. Hi, John. Always glad you could come to the party. I just put up a tweet. I twatted, and we'll see if anybody, I don't know if I put the right hashtags on it, so we'll see if anyone sees it. I'll put this one up. This is a nice quiet one. See if the Dalek can exterminate it. Hi, Jabara.
Exterminate. Ow. Yes.
All right, we're almost there. Shall I begin?
Please do.
All right. You think there's enough light?
Yeah.
Hope so.
It's what we got.
That's what we got. All right. Hi there. This is now Bridge to a Better World, and I'm Teresa. That's Ani, and we would like to have some commentary on the events of the week, starting with some headlines. The Oregon chapter of the Council on American Islamic Relations is condemning an attempted arson at a mosque on Portland on Tuesday night. This is from KETU, which I kind of hate to quote, but there's not a lot of coverage of this. They say that in the evening on May 3rd, surveillance cameras recorded someone pouring some sort of accelerant on the back of the Muslim Community Center of Portland's building on North Vancouver Avenue and then lighting it on fire. The fire didn't take off, so the son of a bitch came back. There was only minor damage to the structure, and the cops said the same suspect is linked to a broken window at the Congregation Shur Tikva East Side Jewish Commons. So this is a fascist who gets around. And related fascism news from San Francisco Gate, SF Gate, because if it's news in Portland, it's in SF Gate. At least one shot was fired on I-205 in Oregon during a confrontation with a People's Convoy of truckers and counter-protesters. The incident occurred a week after the anti-COVID-19 mandates convoy went viral when a group of Oakland teens egged them outside of a Safeway, resulting in the convoy angrily leaving town. I've got to say hurrah for the eggs. Shortly before 7 p.m. Friday, Portland police say they responded to the Northeast Glisson Street overpass where they received reports of shots fired amid objects being thrown off the overpass onto the highway below. Police said they found evidence of one shot fired, but no known victims. And if you look on Twitter, you can find that there was actually several shots fired. And the police response has been, "Oh, really?
I
about that?
want to butt in for a
Yes,
minute
why don't you
because
butt
you
in?
were talking earlier
Yeah.
about the attack on the mosque.
Yeah.
And that was on May 3rd, you say? So on
6:45 on May 3rd.
I believe on Monday. Yeah, Monday. So that'd be May 2nd. Leaders at the Congregation Beth Israel in Northwest Portland, which is a very progressive synagogue, reported death threats. There were a death threat left and singe marks showing that there was an attempted arson and anti-Semitic messages painted on an exterior wall. So, there are religious bigots. It points to white supremacy all over the place, right? And who knows, possibly two entirely different people or not. I think that it's, really telling this week that we are, well, we'll get into more of this later, watching the emboldening of the white supremacist, fascist, alt-right, far-right folks, through the convoy and other such things to attack. And I just think it's important to know that. These things may or may not be related in any way, except for, well, they are obviously related. They're related at the very least through the ideology of intolerance and bigotry, murderous bigotry in this case.
Yep. Portland is known to be a bastion of tolerance. And so, shitheads are on a march to punish us for that. So that's the convoy actually stopped. And they fired up their yellow fire truck and tried to hose down the egg-throwing protesters. And somebody shot at them as well. And there's no sign that there's been any effort to punish them. I mean, why would they? Because the cops love them, obviously. And speaking of violence, Andrea Damon writes in WSWS.org, the United States has focused on providing the location and other details about the Russian military's mobile headquarters, which relocate frequently. This has allowed Ukrainian forces to conduct artillery strikes and other attacks that have killed Russian officers. The intervention by the U.S. has had a decisive effect on the battlefield. It added that that's according to the Times. The Times added that the scale of actionable intelligence on the movement of Russian troops that America has given Ukraine has few precedents. The next day, NBC News reported that the U.S. was critically involved in coordinating the sinking of the cruiser Moskva, the flagship of the Russian Black Sea Fleet, and the greatest Russian military disaster in decades. And they write, with increasing frequency, attacks are being directed inside Russian territory with U.S. assistance. The Wall Street Journal pointed to a series of attacks inside Russian territory and unexplained explosions at Russian targets. The article cites Rob Lee, senior fellow at Foreign Policy Research Institute, saying the strikes could be a result of increased intelligence sharing between the West and Ukraine. And they write, any notion that the NATO powers, above all the U.S., are not direct participants in the conflict over Ukraine lies in tatters. The declaration by the U.S. President Joe Biden that it is not true that the U.S. is engaged in a war or even a proxy war is a bald-faced lie. The U.S. and NATO are providing tens of billions of dollars in military equipment and, as these reports document, direct intelligence used by Ukrainian military and far-right militia forces. The reports in the U.S. media have been clearly orchestrated by the White House. The Times writes, the administration has sought to keep much of the battlefield intelligence secret, out of fear it will be seen as an escalation and provoke President Vladimir Putin of Russia into a wider war, end quote. So if that is the case, they write, why is the administration now publicizing its direct involvement in the war? And they write the release of this information to the Times and NBC based on off-the-record statements by multiple administration officials is a deliberate effort on the part of the Biden administration to increase pressure on the Russian government to retaliate against NATO forces. This would create the context for further U.S. escalation up to and including the direct engagement of U.S. troops or the invocation of Article 5 of NATO. Just as the United States succeeded in provoking Russia into invading Ukraine by turning the country into an armed camp on its borders and refusing to negotiate over Ukraine's relationship with NATO, so too is seeking to place the burden of escalation onto Russia by carrying out attacks on the Russian military through Ukrainian forces under its effective control. And I don't want that quote from WSWS.org to give you the impression that I in any way support the Russian invasion. That was not the right response. And they have been absolutely horrible. And don't know what more to say about that. I think we're all in agreement. They shouldn't have done it. And I also want to comment that, during the Vietnam War, the U.S. confronted Russia in a big way, and there were Russian pilots in some of those jets. But this is the first time I can think of that the U.S. is actually involved in blowing up things inside the Russian border, and I can't think of anything more dangerous. And I have
Really,
to wonder,
what kind of good is going to come from that?
Yeah, I have to wonder whether this sort of attitude reflects the fact that the war planners all have access to bunkers, really nice, extensive, multi-billion-dollar bunkers, and helicopters ready at the instant to transport them to them. This includes Nancy Pelosi and all of our leaders. And I call on them to stop escalating the Ukraine war. Providing defensive weapons to Ukraine is one thing, and helping blow up things on Russian territory is insane. This is the nuclear era, and no wishful thinking or access to bunkers is going to change that. Okay, so turning to another crisis, in Grist, they write an early season blaze has turned into New Mexico's second largest on record, torching more than 165,000 acres. And the Calf Canyon fire, the biggest burning in the United States, is one of 6 wildfires in New Mexico right now, a worrying start to what's expected to be an unusually intense wildfire season in the West. President Joe Biden declared a major disaster for the state on Wednesday, offering federal resources to help with recovery efforts. East of Santa Fe, the Calf Canyon fire has burned hundreds of buildings and prompted the evacuation of 6,000 homes. Evacuees left behind goats, rabbits, dogs, while those who took pets with them struggled to find places to stay. It's been an abnormal fiery spring in the U.S., with fires burning across Florida, Texas, and Colorado in March. As of early May, wildfires had already torched 1.1 million acres in the U.S., double that at the same time last year. And this makes me particularly sad since I have wonderful memories of hiking and camping in that area, the Sangre de Cristo wilderness.
You were always going to take me there.
Yeah, well,
someday.
It's kind of burny right now.
Well, let's not go at this moment. I have a couple of things to add, I think. When you're talking about extreme weather and the fact that there's fires going on all over the Southwest, I mean, can we just pause for a minute and ask ourselves when the last time we saw wildfires raging out of control in the Southwest in early March? I haven't noticed that. You're more from around that area. You notice that?
No.
Early March?
No, things tend to be damp.
Yeah. It's about the only time of year things are damp, right?
Yeah.
From what I understand. I haven't been there. Anyways, I also want to point out in climate news, in really horrific climate news, in the Middle East, there in Iraq specifically, there's at least one person who has died and more than 5,000 who've been hospitalized with respiratory urgencies. No one can breathe because of a massive dust storm that was happening yesterday. The dust storm blanketed much of Iraq. Much of the country was blanketed in air you can't breathe because of particulate matter. 6 of Iraq's 18 provinces suffered the storm's effects, including the capital of Baghdad, where authorities urged everyone to stay indoors, especially anyone with breathing difficulties. Um, there's a it's a dire situation, and we know that it's been happening. It actually was affecting Spain as dust storms swept across northern Africa just about a month ago or so. This is again climate emergency time. It's the 7th severe dust storm to hit Iraq in the last month. Right in March, the International Monetary Fund. We love the International Monetary Fund, don't we? The capitalist bastards that uphold austerity conditions around the world. But they did release a report finding temperatures in the Middle East and Central Asia have already risen 1.5 degrees Celsius above the pre-industrial levels, and that has been triggering droughts and causing over, say, 2,500 deaths per year. And that's, those are deaths directly attributable to the climate catastrophe that is going on, that the West is kind of like, we have these accords and we really should do something. We'll go ahead and study that some more and see about the cost benefit analysis and how we can ratio and how's that polling these days, instead of dealing with it like the life and death emergency it is, not only for the planet, I mean, it's insane.
Those haboobs, those dust storms have depleted uranium in them.
Well, there's that. Just when you think it doesn't get worse, Teresa can find a way. And John, thank you for noting. Yes, in fact, 60 degrees Celsius in the Indian subcontinent, temperatures that are uninhabitable, temperatures that kill. And so this is happening right now around us. It's not like we can say, oh, climate change, that's really going to get us if we don't do something soon. It's getting us now. It has been for years. And so far, this continent and much of Europe have not suffered the worst of the consequences. And so we're still sort of twiddling our thumbs and talking about, gee golly, we got to roll it back. We'll go ahead and study that more.
Yeah, well, and then there's Roe v. Wade.
Ooh.
Ain't we got fun? The Alito draft anti-Roe document made me think of U.S. culture war in more psychosocial terms. Pat Buchanan, when he was serving as an advisor to Tricky Dick, to Richard Nixon's campaign in the 1960s, pointed out to Nixon that he could rope in the Catholic vote and thereby add to the racist Southern strategy by coming out against abortion. Excuse me. All that worked tremendously for Nixon. Phyllis Schlafly was agitating against abortion at the same time, and by the 80s, the Republican Party had changed course and was known and understood to be anti-abortion. But the connection with racism isn't just historical. Southern white evangelicals hate and fear people of color, and indeed anyone and everyone different from them, and they just can't seem to stop. So they have developed several strategies over the years to reconcile their image with that of a loving Christ. The first is to simply deny
that there was a loving Christ,
that they are racist, and that all of the things that they do, from support of racist killer cops to anti-BIPOC gerrymandering and poll closing, is motivated by racism. But they have an internal problem as well, because although they can't stop hating, they are aware at some level that it is immoral to hate people for no reason but their degree of melanin. This is why the anti-abortion stance is so important to them. They are able, I'm sorry, I'm just Flemish today. They are able to say, well, I may be a racist, but at least I don't kill babies. And all you people to the left are baby killers. And you can see, evangelicals yelling on the courthouse steps, in the newsreels right now, baby killers. This is a classic diversionary tactic, and it has worked very well as a performative moral stance. It's never stated as such, of course. It only works if it stays unanalyzed and largely subconscious. The anti-science attitude of Southern whites works well in tandem, so that rather than realizing they're getting worked up over dime-sized blastocysts, indistinguishable to the non-expert between an elephant or a dog embryo at a comparable level of development, they imagine that they are defending tiny little innocent babies. And of course, these are imagined to be untouched by even the peculiar idea of original sin.
Otherwise known as birth.
Yeah.
You're okay in the womb. Once you get out of it, we don't really care about you anymore.
You touched a hoo-hoo on the way out. I mean,
Yep.
that's how ridiculous it is. So the problem now arises as the long anticipated.
It's a sick religion. Let's just face it. Like when it gets to the extreme people, the people that hold those tenets as an excuse to be misogynist, racist, and otherwise abhorrent. Okay, I'm sorry. I don't mean to say all of Christianity is bad and all Christians are terrible. I do not mean to say that. I've known some good ones, but
some of my best friends.
I know, right? I'm digging myself in deeper. What I'm trying to say here is the interpretations of Christianity over the years, the last 1700 of them or so, have been to our detriment.
Well, and so the problem now arises as the long anticipated defeat of Roe arrives, that the stance that has worked so well as a trenchant pseudo-moral attitude is a different beast altogether when the majority of the American people are mobilized to defend what they had long assumed was their right under settled law. It's like the old joke about the chasing dog queried by the motorist after stopping her car. Got to ask the dog, now that you've caught that tire, Fido, what are you going to do with it? As long as Roe v. Wade was not overturned, the right could pose as the moral opposition, and now they are clearly in opposition to the will of most voters in a big way, 70 or 80%. So they are suddenly shutting up about the end of abortion health services, and instead, Mitch McConnell, for example, are desperately and ineffectively trying to divert attention to the leaking of the document, but no one really cares about that.
Because we all know that the privacy of the document, the privacy of the justices to make their decision in a private setting is sacrosanct.
Yeah, privacy
should never ever mess with those privacy issues for the Supreme Court.
So really, no one cares about that shit, and it's not working. When the rubber hits the road, it's about the hegemony of cis men, and that brings me to the trans aspect of the whole thing. The attack on the right of people to own their own bodies is part of a broader fascist agenda. The idea is to maintain the ancient and degenerate rule of men only. And people like me threaten that rule by example, because what does it mean to be a man if I can live as a woman? What does it mean to be an ordinary, natural, gender flexible human if we cannot be divided into the conquerors and the conquered? I'm hoping that the pushback from this event includes the revitalization of the Equal Rights Amendment, because it's clear it is needed more than ever. And frankly, I hope it results in revolution. But that's not a surprise. I'm a revolutionary. For a start, I hope that the combination of MAGA voters lost to their idiocy about masks and vaccines combines with this revitalization of resistance to knock reactionaries out of power across the nation. The MAGA party now has to face the fury of half the population as they realize their human rights have been severely degraded by rapist Kavanaugh, rapist Alito, rapist Thomas, rapist Roberts, and rape apologist Barrett. 3 of them were appointed by known rapist Trump. And I say rapist because rape is the enforcement mechanism and the wielded club of patriarchy. Just as a policeman's gun enforces capitalism and homelessness, and the tanks and planes and torturers of the armed forces enforce imperial tribute, all empires collapse by turning their violence on themselves, and our empire is no exception. It is ripening on schedule to keep the system of parasitism in place with the worst distribution of wealth in human history. It is necessary to keep the livestock confused, and that's where we're at today. Quoting Adam Serwer's article in The Atlantic, aside from rights specifically mentioned in the text of the Constitution, Alito argues only those rights deeply rooted in the nation's history and tradition deserve its protections. This is as arbitrary as it is lawless. Alito is saying there is no freedom from state coercion that conservatives cannot strip away if conservatives find that freedom personally distasteful. The rights of heterosexual married couples to obtain contraception or of LGBTQ people to be free from discrimination are obvious targets. But other rights that Americans now take for granted can easily be excluded by this capricious reasoning. In a series of cases beginning in the early 1920s, the court carved out a protected space for family, marriage, and children that the government is constrained from regulating. That's a quote from Kimberly Whale. She wrote last December, quote, a rollback of Roe could split this sphere open if the conservative theory that implied rights are constitutionally invalid takes hold, and states begin passing draconian laws that creep into other areas of intimate personal life, end quote. And further quoting, the right-wing majority's radical repurposing of the so-called shadow docket to set precedents and nullify constitutional rights rather than simply deal with time-sensitive matters foreshadowed this income. And the court's religious freedom decisions related to the coronavirus pandemic and in its choice last year to allow Texas to nullify the right to an abortion, you can see the outlines of this new legal regime. On the grounds that it constitutes a form of religious discrimination, conservatives will now be able to claim an exemption from any generally applicable rule, for example, leave the trannies alone, that they do not wish to follow, while imposing their own religious and ideological views on those who do not share them. Although the right-wing justices present this rule in the language of constitutionalism, they are simply imposing their ideological and cultural preferences on the rest of the country. Roe itself left those opposed to abortion free not to have one. Striking it down allows states to prevent those seeking abortions from obtaining them. And it concludes another way to frame this sort of nonsense. No, excuse me, this is my writing. Another way to frame this sort of nonsense.
Aren't you concluding?
Is states' rights. And it is states' rights dressed up as the sort of liberal-minded allowance that long provided a fig leaf for slavery. If women and trans men are human beings, they deserve the same bodily autonomy in Alabama that they have in Oregon. You know, they don't cease becoming Americans because they live in Texas. Fascism must go down by any means necessary. Elie Mystal is calling for Biden to provide abortion services in federal facilities in the meantime, and I think that's a fine idea.
So this was reported by Democracy Now! This morning. The Louisiana House has advanced a Republican-led bill that would classify abortions as murder, allowing prosecutors to criminally charge and terminate their pregnancies. Reproductive justice advocates have condemned the measure as blatantly unconstitutional and barbaric. In related news, college and high school students on Thursday held walkouts across the country. Here you go. You can read comments on that, and you can even comment back. Well, this little tutorial is brought to you by Podcast with the Seam Showing, as I used to say of our radio show. In related news, as I said, college and high school students on Thursday held walkouts across the country as protests continue in response to that leaked Supreme Court document. Reveals the court is preparing to overturn Roe. And not only that, but as Teresa has been saying, to really roll back privacy rights, to really end privacy rights. It is written like dominoes, right? The right to be queer without prosecution. You know, this could roll back the sodomy laws that were struck down in the 80s. This could roll back so much. It's just for granted that we can live our lives as free individuals. With some, okay, fine, some discrimination, some bigotry. Sure, we're constantly having to fight for rights. But, you know, the idea that things can be rolled back totally 50 years and more, 60 years when it comes to the idea of interracial marriage, you know, all of these things can be on the line if this decision actually goes through as written. So it's a terrible abortion rights, which are paramount, you know, to having full control, full sovereignty over our bodies, but also in terms of the precedents that the wording of this decision can set up. Also, in terms of the precedents that the wording of this decision can set up. Well, in the last 400 years. What's his name? Hale?
I think it was Hale, yeah.
Yeah. You know, the person who absolutely was in step with the witch hunts who was absolutely in step with women are primarily evil and must be controlled. And he gets quoted lovingly by Alito throughout the decision. So that's the world we want to live in, is it, Alito? Um, I digress.
Well,
Sorry,
thank,
I am. For those that don't know, I worked in a clinic that provided women's health care, including contraceptive services, including abortion. And I have sat with women through abortions. I have been a medical assistant during the procedures, and I have heard their stories. I know that there is absolutely no one outside of that person that should be making that decision for them, right? That this is the ultimate invasion. And to take away any exceptions for the idea of, if the person has become pregnant due to rape or incest, that these are no longer reasons one would necessarily seek to terminate a pregnancy, that you would force a child to carry to term and birth a pregnancy caused by uh, a rape by a family member. What country is this? Where do we live? That is horrific in the extreme.
even Sharia law has exceptions that allow
So
abortion.
it's so terrible. It's terrifying. And I am a little overcome. Teresa says, "What are you going to say about this?" And I'm like, I don't, I, I've talked about it a lot over the last several weeks as we look state by state at these laws that are becoming ever more restrictive. And I've talked about it a lot, and the idea that more states are rolling back healthcare and healthcare access for trans individuals, and are really denying the idea that really trying to make trans people go away by the denial of healthcare. I've talked about these things a lot, and yet this week it's hitting. So there's that. Uh, oh, oh, yeah, we've got a message saying that we are unstable. There we go. I was feeling a little unstable there. Hopefully, we are back now. Sorry about that. Um, okay, so I'm a little screamy, and I'm trying to get a grip because we need to be effective in our action and our responses. I do recommend everyone pick up a good book that has some history. Uh, it's by a local writer, Judith Arcana, an amazing woman and a friend. And she was with the Jane Network. She was a Jane in Chicago in the late 60s. This was a network of women who made sure that people in need could get access to a safe abortion. And she has written a book called Hello, This is Jane. And I recommend y'all read it. Pick it up, order it online, whatever you need to do. Broadway Books, I believe, has it. And yeah, check it out. Judith Arcana is her name. Hello, This is Jane is the book.
It's good reading. Well, sometimes it is time just to go out and scream. And
That's good.
I think
Because I'm
people
not
have.
sure I have
Yeah.
much choice.
It's and I'm hoping for a broader mobilization. It's, we saw it coming, and people could say, "Oh, it's not a surprise" and stuff like that. But when the 6 reactionaries on the court, is it 6? Is it 5 reactionaries on the court? Actually turned around and showed their fangs. It was pretty ugly, and I think it's got people thinking. When Trump was elected, that was just one hell of a shock, I think, for just about anyone who's capable of thinking. And it showed us, who we are as a nation. Millions of us are fascists, and the fight back has got to take many forms. But we have a hell of a job in front of us. That's about all I have to say about that. There's going to be many forms. I was really pleased to see that Joanne had suspended her fundraising.
So Joanne Hardesty, who is running for city council for Portland, sent out an email saying she was suspending her fundraising for the weekend because she was so distraught, so pissed off about this right being threatened, that she's encouraging folks to actually donate to the pro-choice movements than her own campaign this weekend, and I think that's really laudable. And another reason I love Joanne Hardesty, and I'm voting for her. Why don't you? If you live in the Portland city limits, she is really a clear choice for a lone voice on that council that has been trying to do good and has been able to make a little headway. But considering she is that fairly lone voice at this moment, it's only been a little.
Yeah.
I hope she's got more support on the council moving forward. So,
Well, the fact that she's already been the target of our criminal police force shows you that she is effective, and they're frightened of her.
yeah. So, is there more from you?
Nope.
I see.
They got plenty of outrage, but no more content for today.
Well, I guess I got one more. It's sort of a newsy item, really. I do want to say one more thing about Joanne, though. As we are, since we mentioned her, disclosure, I've known Joanne since the 90s when she started doing talk radio at KBOO, where I was a volunteer for 30 years and on staff for some 20 years. So she, and I've known her. I know her to be full of integrity. She is absolutely committed to police reform. She is absolutely unafraid to speak truth to power. And I've watched her in action. There was a day that will live in my mind forever where we were going to the station, maybe, I don't know, 10 years ago now. And it was a Thursday morning. Joanne was just getting off talk radio. Teresa was about to start Press Watch. And we were driving by St. Francis. St. Francis? Yeah, St. Francis Church over on 12th and Oak. And there's often a homeless camp around there. And the cops were clearing it. There was, the truck. Folks were being harassed and their possessions were being thrown out. It was a sweep in sort of the earlier days of the Portland sweeps. And we got to the station, and I was trying to find recording equipment so I could run back and do a story for the news. And Joanne was getting off there. She's like, what are you doing? What are you looking for? And I told her, she's like, oh, let's go. I think there might have been an expletive delete in there. And the next thing I know, she was with me. We were at the site a few blocks from KBOO, and she was yelling at the police. She was demanding that they treat people with respect. She was in their face in a way that, I don't know, I'm a little intimidated sometimes when there's a lot of police around to be yelling in their face if it's just, say, one or two of us.
She's a force of nature. She's like 5 feet tall and 90 pounds.
She's amazing. I will always respect her for her actions that day, demanding accountability face to face. I think she's fearless. I think she's amazing. And she's got my vote, and I hope she has yours. Okay. So I do have this one other thing, and that is about labor organizing. And so there was a meeting in the Senate. Christian Smalls, who was one of the organizers for the Amazon Workers Union, addressed the Senate Budget Committee. And so he said to them, they have captive audiences, Amazon, every single day. For example, at JFK, they did them every 20 minutes. They brought in classrooms the size of 50 or 60 workers and drilled anti-union propaganda into their heads for nearly an hour. They did this 4 times a week. So Smalls called on senators. This is from Democracy Now! This morning, by the way. Smalls called on senators to pass the Protecting the Right to Organize Act. It's a labor law reform that would make it easier for workers to form unions. The bill passed the Democratic-controlled House, but it's stalled now in the Senate, where it faces opposition from Republicans and a couple of Democrats. Guess who? So Thursday's hearing was called by Senate Budget Committee Chair Bernie. And Bernie Sanders urged politicians at all levels of the government to cancel contracts with companies that bust unions and break labor laws. As Senator Bernie Sanders said, taxpayer dollars should not go to companies like Amazon who repeatedly break the law. And now we're talking about billions and billions of dollars in contracts. No government, not the federal government, not the state government, and not any city government should be handing out corporate welfare to union busters and labor law violators. So, just wanted to throw that in. On Wednesday, Senate Democrats voted overwhelmingly against the measure authored by Senator Sanders that would require semiconductor manufacturers that receive federal funding to respect workers' union rights while barring them from outsourcing jobs. Yep, that measure failed on a vote of 6 to 87. So, I guess that points out that much of the Democratic Party, as we've pointed out over the years, is completely corporately owned. When it comes to attacking capitalism and defending our rights to live on a planet free of economic coercion, free of, well, the excesses of capitalism, very few of our elected reps federally are going to be with us.
A fully owned subsidiary of corporate capitalism.
Yeah.
As you say.
And that said, I still am going to be more supportive of the Democrats than I have in the past because, hell, they are at this moment more or less the best safeguard against the outright fascism of the Republican Party. It's a bad choice, and I
think you just have to grab whatever levers of power are available to you without fooling yourself that you have democracy. We have oligarchy, and in order for them to pretend that we have democracy, they have to yield to a certain amount of voting pressure. But we ain't there when it comes to democracy, that's for sure.
Absolutely. So, with that, let me get to the tarot, shall I? We'll call it a night. For tarot this week, we have the Ace of Cups, we have Judgment, and we have the Emperor.
Is that Rider Waite?
No.
It's kind of based on that.
Yeah. Many decks are based on Rider Waite.
Yes.
Well. That said, this is the Modern Witches tarot. So, what does this all mean? Sorry, now I started thinking about a little tarot history, going down the Rider Waite path. Well, no, it differs in these ways. Okay. So, starting with the Ace of Cups, make sure that we are drinking deep from the well of refreshment, right? We are... John Acerbi, you crack me up. Yes. So, what am I saying? The Ace of Cups is really, it's about refreshment. It's about the new feelings, refreshing the heart, really letting yourself be refreshed emotionally, as we have probably been a little depleted. I know I have. So it's really taking in the spring, that feeling of renewal and regeneration that is around us, that follows from May Day, to allow our emotional selves to be full, right? And I'm going to go ahead and say, be looking at the next two cards, to make sure that we are focused on love and that we act in love. Okay. Next card, Judgment. And so Judgment talks about actually taking a really hard look at ourselves, and really doing a little self-assessment. What are we doing right now, and what can we be doing better? How can we be more effective in what we, in actualizing our dreams, in living our authentic lives? What do we need to do to continue to be able to live our authentic lives, and to continue to be able to live our authentic lives? It is a card that really calls for that self-assessment, and also to assess the world around us. And the flip side, to understand that we are also being judged. and to be able to flex and deal with that. Again, remaining strong in yourself. Once you are able to complete your own self-assessment, know who you are, and let folks that would try to shape you into something else know that they are wrong. Okay. And then we have the Emperor. And the Emperor really is a card that talks about traditional power structures. Um, and combined with Judgment, combined with the Ace of Cups, it's to me, again, it goes in two directions. Um, the first is looking at power structures around us and noting what is legitimate and what isn't. And when we see illegitimate power trying to control us, that we stand strong and we exercise our own internal, the flip side, our own internal authority and power. That we draw our boundaries well, that we define what is acceptable and not acceptable, and that we then um, are able to take action to, if we're finding things unacceptable, to take action to right those wrongs. And so it's all sort of a heavy call this week. I'm super glad of the Ace of Cups. Again, making sure that we are acting from a place of being in our true hearts, in and centered in our emotional selves, so that we can um, have that refreshment and we can uh, do the self-assessment, drawing our own boundaries and looking outwards from a place of love and solidarity. That's what I have.
All right then.
Um, so,
Let's see, the Emperor wears our money, huh?
yeah, sure. Uh, with that, then I think that this is it. Thank you all so very much for being with us this morning. Take good care of yourselves throughout this week. Please do hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. This is now Bridge to a Better World. If you haven't done that already, please do. Do hit the like button and leave your comments below on your thoughts about the idea that we are, if the Republicans, if the elected extreme right and the Supreme Court gets their way, that our privacy rights are rolled back 50, 60, 70 years. How do we feel about that? What are we doing about that? How can we be together and acting in solidarity as we look around us in our very own city, seeing mosques and synagogues attacked by bigots, when people are so acting out of such extreme hate? How do we counter that with our love, with our radical inclusivity? How do we move forward? How do we change our world? These are the questions I have. Please do leave your comments below. Share this widely with friends and family.
Thanks for the
And
comments.
we'll see you next week.
And all the ships at sea.
And heck, we'll probably even see you next week from Mexico.
Hey,
Take care.
adios.